Good morning, students. So, last class discussion was on addressing modes, where we have studied different addressing modes and addressing mode examples, that is, instruction examples using the addressing modes. So, addressing mode part was very important here, where we'll be using these addressing modes along with the operands and operations throughout this subject, right? So today I'm going to discuss one important concept, that is assembly language. So this is also a programming language like your machine level language, high level language. So assembly language is also a programming language where we'll be using the different addressing modes and addressing mode examples, instruction examples based on addressing modes in this assembly language. Here, the machine instructions are represented by the patterns of zeros and ones. So normally we know that the machine instructions, which are in terms of the pattern of zeros and ones. So such patterns are used to deal with when discussing or preparing the programs. Therefore, we use the symbolic names to represent these patterns. So far, we have used the normal words such as move, that is move, add, store, then load. So such a type of words we have used. These are what the normal English words. So such words are used for the instructions and the instruction operations to represent the corresponding binary code patterns or the bit code patterns. So when writing the programs for a specific computer, so such normal words are replaced by the acronyms. They are called as mnemonics, such as MOV, ADD, INC, BR. So these are what the mnemonics. So when you write such normal words for the instructions, in turn these normal words are replaced by these mnemonics. Your machine or the computer can understand only these mnemonics, right? I hope these mnemonics are clear. So this load is replaced by LD, store is replaced by str. So add is a mnemonic for add, mov is a mnemonic for mov, like this. So such mnemonics are these are just like the substitute for these normal English words. Your machine can understand only the mnemonics, right? Similarly, one more mnemonic is R3, that is capital R3. So R3 represent register 3, and one more is lock, LOC. So LOC represent the memory location. So these are what the mnemonics, which are machine understandable. So a complete set of such symbolic names and rules for their use, that will constitute a programming language. So that is referred as assembly language. I hope assembly language is clear. Basically, assembly language is a collection of such mnemonics. Assembly language is a collection of such mnemonics. Means assembly language is a programming language which is consisting of such mnemonics or symbolic names. The set of rules for using the mnemonics in the specification of complete instructions and programs is called as syntax of the language. Means whatever the rules we are using for these mnemonics in the specification of a complete instruction and the programs. So such rules are known as the syntax of the language. So as you know, every language has its own syntax. So here also same thing. Assembly language has its own set of rules. So that is known as syntax, syntax of the assembly language. The programs which are written in an assembly language can be automatically translated into a sequence of machine instructions by the program, that is known as assembler, right? So as you know, compiler will convert the high level language into machine language. Similarly, here is the assembler. The assembler will convert the program written in assembly language into machine instructions. That is a conversion from assembly language to the machine instructions will be done by the assembler. The assembler program is one of the collection of utility programs that are a part of system software. The assembler, like any other program, is stored as a sequence of machine instructions in the memory of the computer. A user program is usually entered into the computer through a keyboard and it is stored either in memory or on a magnetic disk, that is the secondary memory, right? So at this point, the user program is simply a set of lines of alphanumeric characters. When the assembler program is executed, then it reads the user program, analyzes it, then generates the desired machine language program. The latter it contains the pattern of zeros and ones specifying the instructions that will be executed by the computer. So this is how the assembly language performs or processing of the assembly language. Next, the user program in its original alphanumeric text format is called as the source program. Yes, as you know, like in other programming languages, a source program is nothing but the original program or the user program which is in its original alphanumeric text format. So the original program or the user program in the original text format is known as a source program, and assembled machine language program is known as object program. So I hope these two terms are clear, source program and object program. So when you write your program, so that original program or the user program is known as source program, and assembler will convert that source program into the assembled machine language instructions. So that is known as object program. So you can say that assembler will convert source program into object program. Object program is nothing but assembled machine language program. Here, the assembly language for a given computer may or may not be the case sensitive. That is, it may or may not distinguish between the capital and the lowercase letters. So this is very important. So we'll use the capital letters to denote all the names and labels in our examples in order to improve the readability of the text. For example, we'll write the move instruction as move r1 comma sum. So even though the assembly language for a given computer is not case sensitive, but for better readability, we'll write this assembly language instructions in capital letter like this: move r1 comma sum. Here, the mnemonic move represent the binary pattern or opcode for the operation performed by the instruction. The assembler translates this mnemonic into the binary opcode that the computer understands. The opcode mnemonic is followed by at least one blank space character. Then the information which will satisfy the operand is given. So in this example, the source operand is in the register R1. This information is followed by the specification of destination operand, which is separated from the source operand by a comma with no intervention blanks. The destination operand is in the memory location that has its binary address, which is represented by the name sum. So this is what the general format I have shown here. So normally the assembly language instructions will follow this format, that is the opcode followed by a space followed by operand or set of operands or the addresses. If there are multiple operands or multiple addresses, that should be separated by comma. So move space r1 comma sum. So move is a opcode here. Opcode represents the operation. R1 is the source operand. Sum is the destination operand, where sum is some memory location here, right? So this is what the format of writing assembly language instruction or assembly language. Since there are several possible addressing modes for specifying the operand locations, The assembly language must indicate which mode is being used. For example, a numerical value or a name is used by itself, such as a sum in this particular instruction, that is in the preceding instruction. It may be used to denote the absolute mode. So, means even if you are using the different addressing mode, but you have to follow this format to write assembly language instruction or assembly language program. So this is what is about the assembly language and the representation of the assembly language. The next important concept is the assembler directives, right? In addition to providing a mechanism for representing the instructions in a program, the assembly language allows the programmer to specify the other information which is needed to translate the source program into the object program. We have already mentioned that we need to assign numerical values to any names used in a program. Suppose that the name sum is used to represent the value 200. So this fact may be conveyed to the assembler program through a statement such as sum equal 200. It means that if there is a memory location, so if that memory location is used to represent a value 200, for example, this you can consider. So here I have taken one more example. Suppose a 20, it is a memory location. So if you are using this location to represent value 20, then you have to write the assembly language statement like this: 20 equal 20, 20. So it means that this is a memory location, that is a TWE and TI. This is a memory location which will represent a value 20, right? So this is what the equivalent statement, if you are representing the location or if you are equating location with some value. Here, this statement does not denote any instruction that will be executed when the object program is in running state. In fact, it will not appear in the object program. It simply informs the assembler that the name 20 should be replaced by the value 20. Means this statement, of course, this statement will just give an instruction to the assembler that wherever this 20 comes, so this should be replaced by 20. So it will just give an instruction to the assembler. So whenever it appears in the program, it will just give an instruction saying that wherever 20 comes, that is TWE and TY, whenever this particular word comes, it should be replaced by 20. So such statements are called as assembler directives or commands. So this type of statements which will give some instruction to the assembler. So such statements or such instructions are known as assembler directives. So this will not perform any operation, or this statement will not perform anything here, but it will just give an instruction to the assembler to do something or to perform something. So such statements are known as assembler directives or commands. So these assembler directives are used by the assembler while it translates a source program into an object program. If the assembler is used to produce an object program according to some arrangement or according to the set of instructions in the memory or according to the memory arrangement, then it has to know. It means that when the assembler is producing an object program according to the written instructions in the memory, then assembler has to know how to interpret the names, then where to replace or where to place the instructions in the memory, then where to place the data operands in the memory. So this part is very important here, this part. So when the assembler is producing an object program for the set of instructions which are written in the memory, so for that assembler has to know how to interpret the names, then where to place the instructions in the memory, then where to place the data operands in the memory. So assembler has to know these things while it is producing an object program. To provide this information, the source program may be written. Of course, there is a source program. So source program itself uh, will understands the assembler, or it will give an instruction. Sorry, it will give an information to the assembler. Here, normally, if you look into the source program, so the source program begins with the assembler directives, right? So already I have discussed one of the assembler directive, that is equate EQU. EQU. So this is an assembler directive. EQU. This is an assembler directive. So this assembler directive will inform the assembler about the value of 20, that is a TWENTY. Similarly, there are other assembler directives like origin is there, data word is there. So these are all different assembler directives which will inform the assembler to do something. So next is here you can see this diagram, right? Let me explain this assembly language representation for the program, right? So these are what the assembler directives, that is EQ, origin, data word, reserve, origin. So these are what the assembler directives, which are what the commands that will inform the assembler to do something. And rest of the statements you know, which are based on different addressing modes, that is move instruction, move, then clear instruction, add instruction, decrement, then the branch instruction, move instruction, return, then end. Again here the return and end, these two are the assembler directives, right? Return means to return some value back, and end means to end the processing or to end the operation. So here you can clearly observe what are the different assembler directives and what are the assembly language statements. So this is just the assembly language representation for the program. Next is the assembly and the execution of programs. Here, as you know, a source program written in an assembly language must be assembled into a machine language, which is known as object program, before it can be executed. Yes, before executing the assembly program, whatever the source program is there, that source program must be converted into the assembly language. Means source program itself is the assembly language program here, right? So basically it is assembly language program which is known as source program. So this source program must be assembled, means it must be converted into the machine language, that is known as object program. So it is what the prerequisite before execution, means before executing the assembly language program, that assembly language program must be converted into the machine language. So this is done by the assembler program, as we know. The assembler program will replace all the symbols denoting the operations and the addressing modes with the binary codes which are used in the machine instructions. Then to replace all the names and labels with their actual values. The assembler will assign the addresses to the instructions and the data blocks starting at the address given in the origin assembler directives. It also insert constants that may be given in the data word commands, and it will also reserve the memory space as it is requested by the reserve command. A key part of the assembly process is determining the values that will replace the names. So this part is very important for the assembly process. Assembly process or the assembler has to determine the values to be replaced, or it has to determine the values which will replace the names. Normally assembler will replace the names with values. That is what the main role of assembly process. In some of the cases where the value of a name is specified by EQU directive, that is equate directive, this is straightforward task. Whenever equate comes, it will directly represent that location with some value. In other cases, where a name is defined in the label field of the given instruction, the value represented by the name is determined by the location of this instruction in the assembled object program. Hence, the assembler must keep track of all the addresses as it generates the machine code for the successive instructions. For example, the names start and loop, so they will be assigned the values 100 and 112 respectively. So like this. So normally, assembler must keep track of all the addresses as it generates the machine code for the successive instructions. In some of the cases, the assembler does not directly replace a name representing an address with the actual value of this address. For example, if you take a branch instruction, then the name which will specify the location to which a branch is to be made or branch target is made, that is not replaced by actual address. Means wherever the branch instruction comes, then branch target means the target address of that branch is not replaced by the actual address. Means in some of the cases, the assembler will directly replace the name representing an address, where in some of the cases it does not directly replace a name which is representing an the address, right? So as I have already discussed this branch instruction, so normally the branch instruction is usually implemented in the machine code by specifying the branch target using the relative addressing mode, as I have already discussed the relative addressing mode in the previous class, right? So the assembler computes the branch offset, which is the distance to the target, that is what the branch target, and puts it into the machine instruction. So for a branch instruction, assembler will compute the branch offset. Branch offset is nothing but the distance to the target or the branch target. Then it will put that branch offset into the machine instruction. As the assembler scans through the source program, it keep track of all the names and the numeral values that correspond to them in a symbol table. Hence, when a name appears a second time, it is replaced with its value from the table. A problem arises when a name appears as an operand before it is given a value. Suppose, for example, This will happen if a forward branch is required. Here, the assembler will not be able to determine the branch target because the name referred to being recorded in the symbol table. A simple solution to this problem is to have the assembler scan to the source program twice during the first pass or during the first scan. It creates a complete symbol table. At the end of this pass, all the names will have been assigned the numeral values or numerical values. The assembler then goes through the source program a second time and substitute the values for all the names from the symbol table. So such an assembler is known as a two-pass assembler. So two-pass assembler concept is very important here. So is it clear what two-pass is here? So I'll explain this again. Here the assembler will scan the entire source program twice. So two times it will scan. During the first scan or during the first pass, it will create a complete symbol table for that program. Then at the end of this pass, all the names will have been assigned the numerical values. Then the assembler goes through the source program a second time. Then to substitute all the values, that is all the values for all the names from the symbol table. So such an assembler is known as two-pass assembler. Means the assembler which will scan the source program twice by generating the symbol table. Means the assembler which will scan or which will go through the source program. The assembler which will scan through the source program twice and generates a symbol table which will replace all the names with the values or which will substitute the values of all the names from the symbol table. So such an assembler is known as two-pass assembler. Here the assembler stores the object program on a magnetic disk. Magnetic disk means secondary storage you can consider a secondary device, secondary storage device, right? So normally the assembler will store the object program on the magnetic disk. The object program must be loaded into the memory of the computer before it is executed. So this prerequisite is very important. Before executing the object program or before executing any program, so that program or that object program must be loaded into memory of the computer. So make sure before executing the program, the object program or the uh, means okay, the object program must be loaded into the memory before execution. So this you remember. So for this to happen, the another utility program called a loader must already been in memory. So here, as I told, before executing a program, the object program or that program must be there in memory. So who has to load that program into memory? So there is a loader which is already there in memory. This loader will load the object program into memory of the computer before it is executed. That is what the responsibility of loader is. Then executing the loader program, that is means executing the loader, it performs a sequence of input operations needed to transfer the machine language program from the disk into the specified place in the memory. Means whenever the loader program executes or whenever the loader executes, then loader it performs the sequence of input operations which are needed to transfer the machine language program from the disk into the specified place in the memory. So this part is very important. The loader must know the length of program and address in the memory where it will be stored. The assembler usually places this information in a header which is preceding the object code. Having the loader, that is having the loaded object code, the loader starts execution of the object program by branching to the first instruction to be executed. Then it will recall that address of this instruction has been included in the assembly language program as the operand of the end assembler directive. The assembler includes this address in the header, which is preceding the object code on the disk. As I told, the loader it will load the set of instructions from magnetic disk into the memory. For that, the loader must know what is the length of that program and what is the address in the memory location. So this information will be put by the assembler itself in the header part of the source program. Here assembler includes the address in the header which is preceding the object code on the disk. When the object program being executed, it proceeds to completion unless there are logical errors in the program. The user must be able to find the errors easily. Means until and unless there are errors, there happens the execution of the object program. If there occurs any errors, then only to stop the execution of object program. Otherwise, it will keep on executing the object program instructions. Here, the assembler can detect and report the syntax errors. To help the user find the other programming errors, the system software usually includes the debugger program. Yes, there are the debugger programs which will help in detecting the user errors or the normal programming errors. So this program enables the user to stop execution of the object program at some point of interest and to examine the contents of various processor register and the memory locations. So debugger program will help in debugging or detecting the normal programming errors. Then assembler will detect the syntax errors. So until there are errors, the object program keeps on executing till the completion. So this is what is about the assembly and the execution of programs. Then comes the number notation. When dealing with these numerical values or number values, it is very convenient to use the familiar decimal notation, right? Of course, these values are stored in the computer as the binary numbers. In some of the situations, it is more convenient to specify the binary patterns directly. Most of the assemblers will allow the numerical values to be specified in the different ways using the conventions that are defined by the assembly language syntax. For example, consider the number 93, which is represented by the 8-bit binary number, that is 01011101. If this value is to be used as an immediate operand, then it can be given as the decimal number in the instruction like this. That is add hash 93 comma r1. Hash 93 is some immediate operand. So if you are using any immediate operand in the instruction, then that immediate operand, which is nothing but a number, so that number should be given as a decimal number. In turn, it will represent it as a 8-bit binary number or binary pattern. So this is one thing, or as a binary number identified by the prefix symbol as a percent. So the second notation you can see, you can also use like this, that is a hash, that is add hash percentage this comma r1. So this is nothing but a binary bit pattern of 93. So this is what the one more notation. Means basically these are what the notations to use the numericals in the assembly language. One is you can directly write that number as immediate operand, which is preceded with hash. And one more is if you are writing the binary pattern of that number, then you have to use hash percentage, that 8-bit pattern of that number. So this is binary notation. Here the binary numbers can be written more compactly as the hexadecimal. That is what the third notation, right? By using the hexadecimal or hex numbers, in which 4 bits are representing by a single hex digit. The hex notation is a direct extension of BCD code given in the library, you can say. The first 10 patterns are represented by the digits 0 to 9 as in BCD, that is a binary coded decimal. The remaining 6 4-bit patterns are represented by the letters A, B, C, D up to F, right? So in hexadecimal representation, the decimal value 93 becomes 5D. 5D is the hexa representation or hexadecimal representation of 93. So in assembly language, a hexa representation or hexadecimal representation is identified by a dollar sign prefix. So we'll write this 93 in the hexadecimal notation like this: add hash dollar. So dollar represents the hexa notation or hexadecimal notation. So 5D is the hexadecimal representation of 93. So like this you can use. So these are what the different number notations. So these notations will help you in writing the numericals or in writing the numbers in the assembly language. Next, I will discuss some of the different types of instructions. So here you can just note down these instructions. One is data transfer instructions. So already I have discussed these instructions. So we'll be using these instructions throughout the computer organization. So these are what the names, that is the normal names or the normal English words. And these are what the machine language representation or mnemonics for this instruction. So load means LD, store ST, move, then exchange XCH, input IN, output OUT, push, pop. So these are what some of the data transfer instructions, which are basically used to transfer the data from one location to other location. So one more thing you can notice, data value is not modified here, right? Next is the data transfer instructions. Here I have written different addressing modes. So this is just a summary of these addressing modes. Direct addressing mode. So I have written these examples by using by taking a load, that is a LD as the operation, load operation, indirect addressing, then the relative addressing, then immediate addressing, where you are using the numbers, then index addressing, then register addressing, then register indirect addressing, auto increment addressing. So this is just a summary of different addressing modes. So how exactly we will be writing the assembly language instructions with respect to these addressing modes. Next is data manipulation instructions. So these instructions are used to manipulate the data or to modify the data operands. One is arithmetic, one is logical and bit manipulation, and one is shift, right? So increment, decrement, subtract, multiply, divide, add, carry, subtract, borrow. So these are all arithmetic instructions which will perform the arithmetic operations. Then the logical and bit manipulation instructions are clear and or complement, XOR, that is exclusive or, clear carry, set carry, complement carry, enable interrupt, disable interrupt. So these are all the logical and bit manipulation instructions. Then the third category is somewhat the shift instructions, logical right shift, logical shift left, like arithmetic shift right, arithmetic shift left, rotate right, rotate left, rotate right to carry, rotate left to carry. So these are what the other category of instructions, which are data manipulation instruction, which are used to modify or to manipulate the data or data operands. That is arithmetic, logical, and bit manipulation operations, and shift instructions. Right. Next is program control instructions. So already you know branch instruction, and also these instructions are used to control the flow of program. Basically, they will control the program flow. That is what the program control instructions. So in this category, I have listed the instructions like branch instruction, jump, skip, call, then return instruction, compare, test. So if you can analyze these instructions, so basically these instructions will control the program depend on some condition. Here a branch, it will branch to a particular address, or it means it will take the program control or program flow to a particular address. Jump means it will directly jump to the specified address. Skip means it will skip some set of instructions. Call means it will call some function which is written in some address or some location. Return means it will return the end value, right? Compare means it will compare based on some condition. Test means it will test some condition. So like this, you can control the program flow by using these program control instructions. Next is conditional branch instructions. So this the main conditional branch instruction is branch. Branch instruction is the conditional instruction or conditional branch instruction. So it will perform the branching based on some condition. That's why it is known as conditional branch instruction. For example, branch if zero. So if there is zero or if the result is zero, then only it will branch. Branch if not zero. If the result is not zero or if the condition result is not zero, then it will branch. Similarly, branch if carry. If there is carry generated, then it will branch. Branch if no carry. If there is no carry, then it will branch. Branch if plus, branch if minus, branch if overflow, branch if no overflow. So depending upon condition, it will perform the branch instruction or branch operation, that is branching. So such instructions are known as conditional branch instructions. Next is basic IO operations, which are nothing but the basic input output operations, right? So in the previous section, as I have described the machine instructions and the addressing modes. So we have assumed that the data on which these instructions operate are already stored in the memory. We knew we now examine the means by which the data are transferred between the memory of a computer and the outside world. So basically, IO it performs input and output operations, right? So this is just for the movement of data between the computer memory and the outside world. Means uh, basically these IO, the or input output operation will act as a means or media between the computer memory and the outside world, which will help in the data transfer. Here, IO operations are very much essential. Yes, input output operations are very much essential, and the way they are performed can have a significant effect on the performance of the computer. So you can say that IO operations are directly proportional to the performance of the computer. You can able to perform these IO operations at a faster rate, then you can say that the performance of the computer is very good. That's why You can say that input output operations are very much essential and they will directly affect on the performance of the computer. How fast you can perform these operations, uh, that much you can improve the performance of the computer. Now consider a task which will read in a character input from the keyboard and produces the character output on a display screen. A simple way of performing such IO task is to use a method known as program controlled IO. The rate of data transfer from the keyboard to a computer is limited by typing the speed of the user, which is unlikely to exceed a few characters per second. The rate of output transfers from the computer to display is much higher. It is determined by the rate at which the character can be transmitted over the link between the computer and the display device. Typically, there are several thousands of characters per second, right, which will be transmitting in between the computer and the display device. However, this is still considered as the slower than the speed of processor that can execute millions of instructions per second. The difference in speed between the processor and IO devices, it will create the need for a mechanism to synchronize the transfer of data between them. A solution to this problem is as follows. So here you can note down the solution. On output, the processor sends the first character, then it waits for a single character from the display that the character has been received. It then sends the second character and so on. So this is what the simple solution. So normally how it performs is on output, the processor first it sends the first character, then it waits for a single character from the display device. So that character has been received. Then it sends the second character and so on. So input is sent from the keyboard in a similar way. The processor waits for the signal indicating that character key has been struck and that its code is available in some buffer register associated with the keyboard. Then the processor proceeds to read that particular code. Here, the keyboard and the display are the separate devices as you can see in this figure. So these are all the different or the separate devices. Keyboard and the display are separate devices, right? The action of striking a key on the keyboard does not automatically cause the corresponding character to be displayed on the screen. So normally how it will happen is one block of instruction in the IO program transfer the character into the processor and another associated block of instruction causes the character to be displayed. So it is in terms of blocks. As you can analyze this thing through this diagram or illustration of this diagram. Here as you can see keyboard and display are the separate devices, right? So when you strike a key on the keyboard, it does not automatically cause the corresponding character to be displayed on the screen. So what will happen is one block of instruction in the IO program, it transfers the character into processor. Then another associated block of instruction causes the character to be displayed on the display device or on the output device. So this is how the character transfer and the display of character will happen in the computer. Okay. Now consider the problem of moving a character code from keyboard to the processor. striking a key first to store the corresponding character code in an 8-bit buffer register which is associated with the keyboard. Let us call this register as data in, which is shown in this figure, right? To inform the processor that a valid character is in data in. Then a status control flag, that is SIN, which is set to 1. A program monitors a SIN. Yes, the program will monitor SIN, and when SIN is set to 1, the processor reads the content of data in. When the character is transferred to processor, then SIN is automatically cleared to 0. I hope this process is clear. So I'll repeat this. So when you strike a key, that key stores the corresponding character code in an 8-bit pattern or 8-bit buffer register which is associated with the keyboard. Means when you press a key on the keyboard, so to store that particular character in a 8-bit buffer register which is associated with the keyboard. So that buffer register is known as data in. So to inform the processor that a valid character is stored in data in. For that there is a status control flag, that is SIN, which is set to 1. Means if SIN is set to 1, it indicates that a valid character is stored in data in, that is buffer register. So here a program monitors SIN. Means a program will be continuously monitor the SIN. So when SIN is set to 1, then the processor reads the content of data in. Means if SIN is set to 1, it indicates a valid character is there in data in. So if SIN is set to 1, then the processor will read that character from data in register. So when the character is transferred to processor, then SIN is automatically cleared to 0. So if a second character is entered at the keyboard, then again the SIN is set to 1. Then that character will be taken by the processor. So when the character is transferred to processor, then SIN is set to 0. So this process repeats. So an analogous process takes place when the character are transferred from processor to the display. Here a buffer register data out and status control flag S out are used for this transfer. Means to transfer the character from processor to display. There are the buffer register, that is data out, and the status control flag is S out. So data out and S out will help in transferring the character from processor to the display. When S out is set to 1, then the display is ready to receive a character. Under program control, the processor monitors S out, and when S out is set to 1, then the processor transfer the character code to data out. In this way it will happen. So the transfer of character to data out, it clears S out to 0. Means when S out is set to 1, then the processor will transfer that character from data out to the display. And when the character is transferred to the display, then S out is automatically set to 0. So when the display device is ready to receive the second character, then again S out is set to 1. The buffer register data in and data out, and the status flags S in and S out are the part of circuitry commonly known as device interface. Here actually data in, data out, S out. So these are all the part of a circuitry or a circuit. So that is known as a device interface. So this device interface will help in transferring the data from keyboard to processor, then from processor to the display. So the circuit for each device is connected to the processor via bus. So this device interface or circuitry for each device is connected to the processor through bus. So bus will act as a media here. So in order to perform IO transfer, that is the input output transfer, we need the machine instructions that can check the state of status flags and transfer the data between the processor and the IO device. These instructions are similar in the format to those which are used for moving the data between a processor and the memory. For example, the processor can monitor the keyboard status flag SIN and transfer a character from data in to the register R1 by the following sequence of operations, that is read wait branch to read wait if SIN equal to 0, then input from data into R1. So basically this is to perform the IO transfer. We need the machine instructions which will check the state of status flags and transfer the data between the processor and IO device. So basically this sequence of operations, so these two operations are used to check the state of status flags and transfer the data between processor and the IO device. So these instructions are similar in the format which are used for moving the data between processor and the memory, right? Here the branch operation is usually implemented by two machine instructions. The first instruction tests the status flag and the second will perform the branch. So basically the set of these instructions or these operations is nothing but the branch operation, right? So here a branch operation is implemented by two machine instruction. The first instruction it will test whether the status flag is set or not, and the second operation it will perform the branch. Although the details will vary from computer to computer, but the main idea is that processor monitors the status flag by executing a short wait loop here, right? And proceed to transfer the input data when SIN is set to 1 as a result of pressing the key. The input operation it will reset SIN to 0, right? So one more sequence of operation you can observe here, right? So this sequence of operation is used for transferring output to display. So here also you can see the next set of operations, right? Write wait branch to write wait if S out equal to 0, then output from R1 to get out. So this will, so first operation will check whether S out flag is set or not. Second will transfer the data or character from processor to the display. Is it clear? Second setup operation. Here also same, the branch operation is implemented by two machine instructions. The wait loop is executed repeatedly until the status flag SOut is set to 1 by the display. When it is free to receive a character, the output operation transfer a character from R1 to data out to be displayed. Then it will clear SOut to 0. Here we assume that the initial state of SIN is 0 and initial state of SOut is 1. So this initialization is normally performed by the device control circuits when the devices are placed under the computer control before the program execution begins. So here you can see this program controlled IO. So just see this how this program controlled IO is set up here. That is IO mapped IO and memory mapped IO. So it's just a circuitry here, as I told the interface. So till now we have assumed that the address is issued by the processor to access the instruction and operands always refer to the memory locations. So many computers use an arrangement called as memory mapped IO, in which some memory address values are used to refer to the peripheral device, that is buffer registers, such as the data in and data out. Yes, data in and data out are the peripheral devices. Means they are what the buffer registers which will hold the character, right? So there are no special instructions are needed to access the contents of these registers. Data can be transferred between these registers and the processor using the instructions that already discussed, such as move instruction, load instruction, store instruction, and all. Right. For example, the contents of the keyboard character buffer, that is a data in, it can be transferred to the register R1 in the processor by the instruction, that is move byte data in comma R1. So just note down this move byte data in comma R1. So what this instruction performs, so it will just transfer the contents of keyboard from data in to the register R1 in the processor. Similarly, the content of register R1 can be transferred, right? Similarly, the content of register R1 can be transferred to data out by the instruction move byte R1 comma data out. So this will transfer the content of register R1 to data out. Here the status flags SIN and SOUT are automatically cleared when the buffer register data in and data out are referenced respectively. The move byte operation code, it signifies that the operand size is a byte. To distinguish it from the operation code move that has been used for the word operands, we have established that two data buffers as shown in the previous figure. So they may be addressed as if they were two memory locations. So if there are two memory locations, then we have established or we have to establish two data buffers. It is possible to deal with the status flags SIN and SOUT in the same way by assigning them the distinct addresses. However, it is more common to include SIN and SOUT in the device status registers, one of each of these two devices, right? Let us assume that a bit B tree in the registers in status and out status, right? So just you can note it down in the slide. That is the bit B3 in the registers in status and out status, which is corresponding to SIN and SOUT respectively. The read operation is implemented by the machine instruction sequence, that is a read wait. So here read operation is implemented by the sequence of machine instruction, that is a read wait test bit hash 3 in status branch equal to 0 read wait move byte data in comma R1. Similarly, the write operation is implemented by this sequence of machine instruction, that is a write wait test bit hash 3 out status branch equal to 0 write wait move byte R1 comma data out. So basically these will deal with the status flags SIN and SOUT by assigning them the distinct addresses. So it is more common to include SIN and SOUT in the device status registers, one for each of these two devices. So finally, so with respect to program controlled IO, There are some assumptions. So assumption is the initial state of SN is 0 and initial state of SOut is 1. Yes, we are assuming that for the program controlled IO or to perform program controlled IO operation, we are assuming that the status flags, that is the initial state of SN is 0 and initial state of SOut is 1. And if there are any drawbacks of this mechanism in terms of efficiency, one is two wait loops, processor execution time is wasted, and alternate solution for this is interrupt. So this drawbacks and solution to the drawbacks that we'll be studying in the later chapters. So this is what my today discussion is, right? So this is about assembly language uh, directives or assembler directives, and basic IO operations, that is basic input output operations. Thank you.